welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Today we're going to talk about space, the final frontier. We've been to the moon, allegedly. Is it time to explore new worlds, to find new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before? Today I'm going to be talking to Seth Davis from Too Real News and Anthony Kay, our resident researcher. Let's go over to Anthony now, who's based in Almaty, Kazakhstan. Not a million miles away from Baikonur Cosmodrome. Baikonur is one of the world's largest space launch facilities, and we've actually mentioned it before in our MH370 episode. If you want to find out more details about that, check out our episode with Jeff Wise, where we discuss possible theories as to the disappearance of MH370. Anthony, it was 1969 when they had the first manned mission to the moon, and then there was a few other landings up until the mid-70s, and then nothing much since. I've always been a bit suspicious about that, by the way. But is it time that we started to exploring space a bit more?
Well, a lot of people seem to think it is. I mean, at the moment there is, this so-called new space race happening. But personally, I feel a little cynical about it. I think it's something that should concern us, quite frankly. I mean, there are a lot of people who are, deeply cynical about what the governments are up to or what big corporations are doing. But somehow, when it comes to space exploration, that cynicism, I should say, just goes out the window for a lot of people, and we just kind of stare with wide-eyed wonder at how marvelous it all is, And look, I'm not excluding myself here. I find almost anything to do with space missions fascinating, and I think that's okay. But I don't think we should forget that there is a very dark side and a very kind of mundane side to the industry. I mean, up until recently, spaceflight was mostly something that governments did, and generally only the most powerful governments. But now the sector is going private, and in fact, governments themselves have planned it that way. In 2006, for example, NASA initiated something called the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services Program, and that was mainly about getting private companies to supply the International Space Station. Essentially, they were saying to the private sector, look, get your act together, build some spacecraft, then submit tenders to us and we'll start awarding you some contract. And that was one of the moves that started this big, flurry of activity, which has now morphed into all kinds of things. You've got Google's Lunar X, you've got the Mars One mission.
That Mars One mission is scheduled for 2026, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. And look, as far as I can tell, there's absolutely no way that Mars One is going to work. There are so many reasons why it's just not happening. I don't know if you know know much about the plans to finance Mars One, but
I know it. I know it's going to cost about $6 billion US.
Yeah,
and the reason why they chose 2026 was it was based on astronomical positions of Mars and the Earth. So, and they believe that they are going to be able to meet this target date as well.
Well, look, they're trying to finance this mission with a kind of crowdsourcing, and they also had plans to have a reality TV show starring the astronauts. But there have been reports that the deal between themselves and the network who was going to host that reality TV show has fallen through. So now they're back to crowdsourcing. I don't think you can crowdsource, as much as I'm a supporter of the art of crowdsourcing, I don't think you can crowdsource a Mars mission. I really don't.
It's certainly ambitious, I'll say that. And I think I share your pessimism a little bit, but I like to believe that if people really believe something can happen, then they could make it possible. And if you look at their website, it's not like they haven't put a fair amount of thought into it and they've recruited 100 people. I wonder sometimes if you get enough people behind something, whether it could actually come into fruition,
Well, look, they said that they were going to conduct a selection process which involved 200,000 people. And in fact, what seems to have happened is that they got far less applicants than they thought they would. But one of the applicants was an astrophysicist called Joseph Roche. Until recently, he was a candidate. He was shortlisted. And he kind of He was turned off the project partly by the selection process. He has, as an astrophysicist, he's met astronauts and been involved in selection processes for other space missions. And he says, look, usually you select rigorously based on training and aptitude and all that kind of stuff. But instead, Mars One are selecting people using something called the Mars One supporter points system. Now, in this system, points represent two things. First of all, the size of your donation, and secondly, how much merchandising you've bought. So you can get points by buying Tshirts. This apparently, makes you more promising as a candidate for the mission, which seems to me, more appropriate for a movie franchise than an attempt to colonize space,
Or more appropriate to buy a T-shirt to help support a podcast program. Remember, you can buy T-shirts at truthtshirts.com. Use the code TRUTH1 to get a 10% discount, and we get a small donation. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. I was actually thinking that one of the problems with this mission that I could see is it could attract people who want to escape from something. You're running up debts or something. Things aren't really working out on Earth. It's a one-way mission. This is a way to escape, and people do this when they go traveling. They think, oh, things aren't working out here. I'm going to go and, relocate to, Indonesia or somewhere like that. And when they get there, they realize that the problems they had were not problems with the environment, but the problems within themselves. And I just wondered what would happen if people got there. For some people, it's going to be a big shock, and they're going to want to leave. And there's a possibility they could start to go a little bit mad and even psychotic. And they these are problems that could really occur. And I just thought some of the psychological issues they might have could be more major than the technical ones.
Well, absolutely, and more, and all the more reason to conduct a rigorous selection process. We know from space missions that have occurred that if you're going to spend a long time off-world, the psychological impact is huge, and you have to be the right, the right kind of person. But look,
so you don't think buying a Mars One mug and T-shirt will be the right criteria?
Or learning the details of the mission by rote, which is another thing that is a prerequisite for being shortlisted. They send you a pack and you have to learn it by rote and be able to recite it, much the same way you have to recite the books of various totalitarian leaders. I hate to make that comparison, but it does kind of sound a little bit, it sounds a little bit creepy. But look, the people who do end up going on this mission, should it ever occur and should it ever reach Mars, may not actually get the chance to start feeling this sense of suffocation that you're talking about, because they may have to cope with a far more literal sense of suffocation. There have been a lot of analyses of the fate of the Mars colony. Unfortunately, the people at Mars One seem quite unwilling to engage with the wider scientific community and listen to their concerns and their possible solutions. They're just not interested. They haven't made any partnerships within the aerospace industry. So, this is an absolute necessity. I mean, even NASA, contracts out for various things. These guys are not doing that. They haven't made those connections. But to give you just one random example of the kinds of technical problems you could be looking at, so there was one analysis done at MIT which suggests that the first fatalities in the Mars One mission will start to occur around day 68 after they arrive, if they arrive. And the reason for that is basically because of the air. Now, they're going to create a dome, essentially, on the surface of Mars, and that dome is going to be shared by humans and crops. Now, in order for the crops to be able to succeed, the air has to be controlled. But the crops themselves will release chemicals, and the crops are actually going to raise the oxygen in the air to an unsafe level, right? Now this means that some of the O2 has to be vented out of the dome. But at the moment, there's no technology which can exclusively vent oxygen, but not vent nitrogen at the same time, which means that the Mars One people cannot regulate the level of oxygen without losing the nitrogen that people need to live. So in other words, around about day 66, when their nitrogen tanks hit empty, things are going to get really uncomfortable, and probably people are going to start dying within a couple of days.
I would have thought the more serious risks of death would occur on takeoff. Like with we've already seen from launches like the Space Shuttle Challenger, which exploded over Florida, that it's quite a dangerous thing to send people into space with all the thrust you need to actually get people out of the atmosphere. I would have thought that'd be the more serious risk they'd be facing, actually getting off the ground and getting on the way to Mars.
Well, sure. I mean, I think we can assume that's a huge risk to start with. But I mean, every space mission faces that risk. I don't think that they've adequately dealt with that. But if we can assume for a moment that okay, they managed to launch safely and they managed to land safely, which is another huge question mark, then these kinds of problems are things that they just haven't dealt with. As I said, they are planning to take some nitrogen tanks with them, but the technical analysis has shown, or at least strongly suggested, that this is a finite supply of nitrogen. It's going to run out, and they have no plan as to what they're going to do after that. So, I don't know. I really hate to be the skeptic here, because, like I said, I am, wide-eyed when it comes to space programs and space missions, but I mean, if there was ever a space mission that seems unlikely to happen, it's this one. It is the mother of all unlikely space missions.
I would say that the date they've chosen may be a bit premature, but that I think it will happen at some point, and I still admire the optimism, and sometimes you just have to go for things and try to make them work and see what happens. But it is a bit of a risk. Anyone who wants to check out some of the details of the Mars One mission, go to www.mars-1.com. Anyway, Anthony, how about we go and continue talking about space and go and see what Seth's up to?
Sure, why not?
Welcome back, Seth. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. How about yourself there, Scott?
Not bad, not bad. I'm aching a bit. I did some Thai boxing today, and my body's kind of reacting to it a bit, but...
well, it helps you get in shape as well as gain some actual self-defense skills. It's always nice.
Yeah, it is about getting in shape, and that also means being careful what you eat and what you drink, avoiding fizzy drinks, for example. And incidentally, fizziness is proving to be an issue for a space mission being planned by NASA. They're planning to design a submarine, or at least it's in its design phase already at the moment, send a submarine to the oily seas of Saturn's moon Titan. No one's sure quite how deep these seas are, though I think the one they're going to be looking at is called Kraken Mare. They believe it might be sort of hundreds of meters deep and covers about 400,000 square kilometers. And that's where they're going to send this sub if it gets built. It's only in the design stage at the moment, so if they do send it there, it might come back with some images of some alien fish.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, somehow I doubt that, but maybe.
The thing is, though, I mean, if we think about the diversity of life on Earth, and certainly, deep sea research has contributed a lot to this field. I think it's becoming more well accepted that the perception that we have of what constitutes life is a very Earth-centric perception. So we know what life is meant to look like on our planet, more or less, and so we think that life will also look kind of like that on other planets and moons. But there's no particular reason why it should, and there's no particular reason why we would recognize it. I mean, we thought for centuries that all life on Earth was carbon-based until we looked around the ocean vents and found the tube-shaped organisms which are not carbon-based at all. They're in fact silicon-based. And that kind of blew the minds of the marine biologists who discovered it, because we didn't know that life could be based on any other element. Well, now we know it can be based on two. We've got another, over 100 more elements to go. And so,
exactly.
So, I mean, I imagine that if any of these missions do find life, and look, I think it's definitely worth searching, but I think it's worth saying too that there's a very high chance that if they find life, they won't recognize it as life.
There's also the chance that it won't be anything as exciting as sort of an alien grey. It'll be more like a mollusk or something like that, which would be a bit disappointing, I think.
Or a bacteria, like a microbacteria. which is something that we'd barely even understand. We'd think it's like some sort of a residue or mold or something like that they've got on the bottom of this methane sea, as it were. And why not? Or some sort of a gelatinous blob that's like an amorphous thing that you can't even really perceive other than as like a slight optical discrepancy.
A blob would be even more disappointing, although I think there was that old movie back in the 50s or before that called The Blob, where it actually started taking over people and killing them, so that might be a bit more exciting anyway. Anthony, we're talking of methane, which, as we all know, can be a bit smelly. I believe you came across an article, a space-related article, about how space might smell.
Yeah, quite interesting. This was reported just in the last couple of weeks, though it's not a new topic at all. Basically, there seems to be a remarkable consistency in what astronauts and cosmonauts will say if you ask them the question, "What does space smell like?" And the answers that almost always come up are, "It smells like meat." Some people kind of talk about seared steak, for example. So space smells like meat. Is one variation. Space smells metallic, and a number of astronauts have said that it smells like welding fumes. Yeah. And the third one is it smells slightly alcoholic.
Maybe they were near that alcoholic bubble.
The alcoholic bubble, yeah, the famous W3 alcohol cloud, yeah. Yeah, look, who knows? But apparently there is enough. I mean, I read an article about this recently that said, quote unquote, "Space is a boozy place." There is enough alcohol in space to keep us all nicely inebriated for the rest of eternity, but it's unfortunately not in drinkable form. However,
you mentioned before the show about this vast amounts of alcohol out in space. What did you mean by that?
So, for example, there is, as I mentioned, the alcohol cloud. It's called W3OH, and it's a cloud of methyl alcohol, which is wood alcohol, not a million miles away from the kind of stuff that you used to be able to drink in absinthe. But there's also some ethyl alcohol in it. That's the kind that we normally drink here on Earth. But it's not nearly as common. However, yeah, as weird as that may seem, alcohol clouds are actually not that uncommon.
So in the future, if you go out for a spacewalk and come across one of those, you might get seriously drunk.
Well, yeah, I mean, who knows? But as I say, like the methyl alcohol, which is the common kind, is not the kind that we can, safely consume. So it's not going to be a pleasant kind of drunk, unfortunately.
Oh dear.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, who knows? Maybe it will be for one of those alien life forms we were just talking about.
But actually, you probably can't get drunk if you're in space. In the early 70s, NASA started shifting their focus from these kind of relatively short moon missions to planning for the possibility of like longer term stays in space for astronauts. And one of the issues they had was how to make the menu more pleasant, because the stuff they had on the Gemini and the Apollo missions was just appalling. At one point one of the NASA's spacecraft project managers tried living on the Apollo diet for 3 days, and he said he, quote, lost the will to live because the space food was just so terrible. So they had their, researchers and so on kind of looking into how you could have decent food in space. And they did actually manage to get a reasonable menu together. They even had barbecued ribs ready to go for one mission. But they also added alcohol. They added they were tossing up between wine and sherry, and they did tests on sherry in zero gravity. But unfortunately, alcohols had some very intense effects on astronauts in weightless conditions. The smell that it left in the chambers where these tests took place, plus the smell of other substances that the astronauts produced after they drank the sherry, it made the zero gravity chambers smell so bad that nearly everyone who went in there afterwards threw up. So, so this was part of the reason why alcohol never really made it onto space missions, but also then at a kind of NASA public gala event, some bigwig made a speech, a public speech, and he mentioned this alcohol project, and NASA got like truckloads of hate mail from the public. Just saying, how dare you, take alcohol into space? This is a terrible, image for our nation, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, the smell of vomit plus, public pressure and a desire to see the space mission as politically correct made the space program dry, and so now astronauts can't drink in space.
What a bunch of killjoys.
Yeah. I wanted to go back a step, Scott, and ask you a little bit more about this Titan mission. How much have they said about what they're hoping to find?
Basically, there's a guy called Steve Ollison, he's the engineer at NASA's Glenn Research Center, who said that we don't know what's there, but basically that's why they want to send the submarine. It's still just in a concept at the moment, so they don't know what's under in these seas, and so they want to survey the sediments that settled on the floor and sample how the chemistry of the sea may be changing with the different depths, and study the weather and the shorelines, and search for signs of sea level change and clues about Titan's climate history. So they're just that's why they want to send the probe there anyway.
Okay, I see. There seems to be a sort of a bit of an uptick of interest in this over the last few years. There's been some renewed interest in Europa, the Jovian moon. I mean, there was a time when it was common for people to say, let's go to Europa because it's got the best chance of life being there of anything in the solar system, and then that sort of died. But in the last few years, it seems to be in the process of being rekindled. Last year, scientists announced that the sea salt that's in Europa's oceans may actually be coating some features on the land, which means there's a tide or the sea has changed size or depth over time. In other words, the oceans and the seafloor are kind of interacting with other parts of the planet. And that kind of thing, again, it's the sort of thing that doesn't guarantee there's life there, but it certainly increases the chances. So now there seems to be interest in these moons again, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, Seth, I think you were looking into exoplanets because there's been quite a lot of those have been discovered since a lot more since the 80s anyway.
I've got this out of phys.org, searching for far out and wandering worlds. Astronomers have made great strides in discovering planets outside of our solar system, termed exoplanets. In fact, over the past 20 years, more than 5,000 of these exoplanets have been detected beyond the 8 planets that call our solar system home. I believe we were discussing this the other day with the Planet X interview, Scott.
That's right, yeah. Some listeners may have heard the previous Planet X episode. If not, go and check that out. But yeah, we were talking about Planet X, and I came across an article today in the New York Post, basically saying that a newly discovered planet could destroy Earth any day now. That's the headline. And basically there's a scientist called Daniel Whitmire of the University of Louisiana, who says that basically this new planet they've discovered, some are calling Planet 9, some people are saying it's the same as Planet X, some people are saying it's not the same, but basically he believes that it could have been the planet that helped wipe out the dinosaurs, and that it may be coming back around again.
To bring in a little bit of this article into that, the majority of these exoplanets have been found snuggled up to their host star, completing an orbit or a year in hours, days, or weeks. And while some have been found orbiting as far as Earth is to the Sun, taking 1 year to complete a circle, but there are a significant amount of these worlds that orbit much farther out, such as Jupiter or Saturn, and even in some cases free-floating exoplanets that are on their own and have no star to call home. In fact, some studies suggest that there may be more free-floating exoplanets than stars in our galaxy. This week, NASA's K2 mission, the repurposed mission of the Kepler Space Telescope, and the other ground-based observatories have teamed up to kick off a global experiment in exoplanet observation. Their mission? Survey millions of stars toward the center of our Milky Way galaxy in search of distant stars as planetary outposts and exoplanets wandering between the stars. While today's planet hunting techniques have favored finding exoplanets near their sun, the outer regions of a planetary system have gone largely unexplored. In the exoplanet detection toolkit, scientists have a technique well suited to search these farthest outreaches and in the space in between stars. This technique is called gravitational microlensing. I don't know if any of you guys have heard about this before, but here's just a little quick example of it or elaboration on it. Gravitational microlensing. For this experiment, astronomers rely on an effect of a familiar fundamental force of nature to help detect the presence of these far-out worlds. Gravity. The gravity of massive objects such as stars and planets produces a noticeable effect on other nearby objects, but gravity also influences light, deflecting or warping the light, the direction of light that passes just too close to these massive objects. This bending effect can make the gravity act as a lens, concentrating the light from a distant object, just as a magnifying lens can focus the light from the sun. Scientists can take advantage of these warping effects by measuring the light of distant stars, looking for a brightening that might be caused by a massive object, such as a planet that passes between a telescope and a distant background star. Such a detection could reveal an otherwise hidden exoplanet. Quote, the chance for the K2 mission to use gravity to help us explore exoplanets is one of the most fantastic astronomical experiments of the decade, said Steve Howe, project scientist for NASA's Kepler and K2 mission at NASA's Ames Research Center in California's Silicon Valley. Quote, I am happy to be a part of this K2 campaign and look forward to the many discoveries that will be made. This phenomena of gravitational microlensing, quote micro because the angle by which the light is deflected is small, is the effect by which scientists are will be looking during these next 3 months. As an exoplanet, it just continues to say the same exact crap again and again and again, which unfortunately so many of these phys.org articles do.
You mentioned about these huge orbits some of these planets have, and exoplanets, and this astrophysicist says that this particular planet 9 has a 20,000 year orbit around the sun, and they believe it could start to knock asteroids and comets towards Earth, and it could explain things like the Chelyabinsk comet, and there was another one in Scotland. There does seem to have been more of those kind of small asteroids coming into Earth recently. This is one explanation for that, basically. This Planet
Indeed.
9 could be heading this way. And of course, if you listen to the Planet X episode we had, then whether these are the same planets, I don't know, but that's basically what Planet X is about as well, that it may not collide with the Earth, but it may start sending asteroids this way.
How does that work? How does it send asteroids that way?
Well, in some cases, physically colliding through an asteroid belt will put these asteroids on a different trajectory as far as their orbit there and stuff, and does push a lot of stuff, debris around space. That's one of the things that they've been finding with looking for exoplanets out in the galaxy, as it were, there, is finding that there's quite a few things of asteroid belts and debris in space. It's actually extremely common to find large amounts of debris in space that can have their trajectory changed as they're just simply free-floating to something different just by simply being pushed by a large enough object, or even having a large enough object pass by to start slightly pull them and then change their trajectory.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
I had a question about this actually for you both, to do with Planet 9 or Planet X or any planet that might be heading this way and could cause global devastation or even be sort of an extinction level event. If you were to find out, or if the government were to come clean and say, yes, this is going to happen, it's either going to affect the Earth, like cause some severe problems, or it could wipe out life on the planet. I wondered how that would affect, and they sort of said, it's going to happen in a couple of years. I wondered how that would affect your current life, like what kind of changes would you make in your lifestyle now if you knew that there's a potential extinction level event?
Yeah, I really don't know how to answer that. I mean, it is an age-old question, and obviously, when it's a little bit like the question of what do you do if the doctor tells you you've got 3 months to live? Well, you really get back to the fundamentals of why you exist. I think, what is it that you think is really important to you? What is it that you most enjoy doing? So I think I would probably try to spend the remaining time with people who I really care about, and hopefully they would travel the world with me in the meantime, just to see as much of it as possible before it, disappeared.
Do you think, before we ask Seth the same question, do you think that maybe we should be a bit more of that mindset anyway, regardless of an extinction level event. Because I wonder whether if something like this did happen and people did, the governments did come clean and said we've basically all got 1 year to live, I reckon it would severely affect what people do and the way they spend their days and months and years and that year. And they would probably enjoy it a lot more. They would actually do all the things they ever wanted to do. They'd be far more motivated. And I wonder whether we could try to tap into that, or we should maybe tap into that kind of feeling to actually lead more rewarding lives.
Well, I think that, I mean, look, not to drag this into too much of a morbid space, but none of us are going to escape death, and death is
Speak
for
yourself,
the person. Sorry, I'm very sorry, Scott.
Yeah, we were talking about cybernetics on a prior episode there. Who knows?
So none of us are going to escape death unless we upload ourselves onto the motherboard of the future. And death is an extinction level event for those who experience it, in the sense that when you die, the world goes with you, whether or not you believe in an afterlife. Unless you believe in an afterlife where you just continue to be here in another form or in an unrecognizable form. If you're dead and nothing happens to you, or if you're dead and you move on, then that is the extinction of Earth for you. And I think probably keeping that in the back of your mind might motivate you to kind of make your time count a little more. I don't know, but it might. I mean, certainly, as you get a little older, you start to think, as when you're doing the things you do. I mentioned travel before, and when you travel in your 20s, you don't think about anything but the travel that you're doing at the time. When you travel in your 40s, for me at least, there is the sort of thought occasionally that, wow, there's only a finite number of these trips that I can do, so they better be good, So I don't know. What do you think, Seth?
Oh, wow. I think you did a great job on answering that one. I was going to say something much similar there, as far as people living like that in the moment, as it were, right now, instead of needing some sort of catalyzing event to get them to be galvanized to actually make a difference in their own life, and to start living a little bit less like a wage slave robot on a regular basis there, and simply doing something that they love and living for the moment, essentially, because you don't know. I mean, as many people are so sure through faith or any of this stuff as far as their afterlife goes, or that there's not an afterlife, or anything that they have there. All those ideas are based on faith there. The simple fact is nobody knows. Nobody. I mean, you can have all the people go through so-called near-death experiences and all that, but you really never know. And I mean, you really never know when you're going to die either, because it could be a car wreck tomorrow. You could slip and fall in the shower. It could be just something ridiculous like that, and it's over. And that's just it. So you've really got to make the moment count all the time. However, I would like to get back on the space topic here, of the fact that these are all, how do I put this nicely? This is all speculation, really, with a white lab coat on, because as much as people, quote unquote, know about the universe, about our galaxy, about even our solar system there, heck, even about our own planet, we really know next to nothing in the big scheme of things. I mean, but continually people want to say that, well, we know this, we know that. I mean, just really think about it for a moment here, guys. NASA's using microscopic little distortions in light of something that they allegedly know, but in no way can actually observe physically from that sun or that planet's orbit or anything like that, at least not for the next X thousand years. But it's kind of ridiculous at the same time, because I just see people looking to all this different stuff, looking into space as some sort of escape from what we have right now. But in the meantime, everybody's treating the planet that we're on right now as though it's not the only one we're aware of that we could survive on, at least at the moment. And that's I think that leads to a highly irresponsible lifestyle. And I think people giving other people, especially guys that are so-called intellectual betters there, the ability to make serious decisions in your life for you, to make you look off into space as some sort of escape from Earth or escape from the life you're living there, really need to have a reality check.
I think you touched on a pretty interesting question there. There is a level of scientific knowledge which does go beyond the observable, and I think that layer of scientific knowledge is increasing. So if you think about the era of Isaac Newton. Newton had this theory of gravity, which at the time kind of blew minds, and rightly so. But you could see it for yourself, so to speak. So you didn't need to put faith in the scientific worldview to the extent that you do now, because he could say, look at what happens when I drop this apple. What do you think's doing that? And we could go, oh yeah. Exactly. Can't exactly see it in action. We can't see the force sucking the apple towards the earth, but I can see where you're going with this. It seems perfectly logical to my senses. Yeah. Now there's a large layer of scientific knowledge that isn't like that. They just tell you the Kuiper belt is full of 100,000 asteroids and other bodies, and we predict that if a body of mass X travels at a certain angle through the Kuiper belt, this will be the effect. And you have to go, okay. and I think that's deeply unsatisfactory to a lot of people. I personally don't know how I feel about it. But I do understand that it disturbs a lot of people, and it sometimes disturbs me too in the realm of biology. I think in the realm of evolution, for example. I'm not in any way anti-evolution, but some of the things that evolutionists say make me think, well, I really have to put my faith in you in order to go with you to the next part of your argument, and so I can really understand why a lot of people are becoming increasingly skeptical of anything that a scientist says that just goes way out of the bounds of what's logical and observable.
I agree. That's the thing that Seth said, which I also wanted to latch on to, was I think we're in the information age. We've got the internet. It seems like we know a lot, but I really do believe we don't know very much about our universe and even our planet, but especially the universe around us. I was looking into parallel universes, which at one point were considered, quite a bizarre idea, but more science fiction. But now it's becoming a more respectable idea amongst scientists. And in reading about the science behind parallel universes, it really made me realise that the scientists don't really know much. They've got so many theories about these parallel universes, and the theories about our universe and how it was created. And if you really look into it, it's clear that there is just so much that's unknown. We're really like ants on an anthill, and we only know our immediate surroundings and the observable things around us. But everything else is kind of very intellectual guesswork.
I would like to put two kind of caveats onto that, and I don't know if you'll agree with me. I think when we say there's not much we know, I think probably a slightly better way to say it might be we know quite a lot, but what we've found out so far has made it clear to us that there's far more we don't know than we ever suspected. So there's a lot of stuff we know, but the more we find out, the more we know that we don't know, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, the man that knows it all knows that he knows nothing, essentially.
Exactly, yeah. And I also think some respect has to be given for the idea of scientists saying, look, we're guessing that this is what's happening. Yeah, science is meant to be falsifiable. The kind of the scientific philosopher Karl Popper really put this into its, I guess, best formulated form in the 20th century. Science is about being able to update your theory. So the idea is we try to make a model of what we think the world or the universe is like, and then we come along and we endlessly try to refine the model. And as we do that, certain things that we had in the model before we'll have to throw away, because now we've got a slightly better, slightly more refined model, which doesn't fit that fact anymore. So the fact is no longer a fact. And I think, look, it's a kind of disturbing. It's a little like the sausage, If you want to enjoy the sausage, you shouldn't watch it being made. But I don't think that's such a. If you think about it, like, it's not such a bad way to proceed. But by saying, all right, well, our model will never be the universe, but as we gain more knowledge, we'll try to make it a bit more like the universe, so that we can see a little bit more of what the universe is like using our model. And if there are bits of it we have to throw out later, well, hey, that's life. I think that's okay. But Scott, you and I have had conversations about this. What I've just described is the ideal of science, not necessarily the day-to-day practice. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I'm not knocking science necessarily on this point, but as you know, I'm not the greatest fan of scientists, of all scientists. There are some great scientists out there, but what I think I'm trying to focus on is that I think there are a lot of people out there that do think, and I'm talking about members of the public. I think there are a lot of people, members of the public, that do think we kind of know everything. We've kind of got everything sorted out, and they put a lot of trust in scientists. But if you read articles like this was on the BBC, and the title was "Why There Might Be Many More Universes Besides Our Own." If you read that article, you can't help but feel left with a feeling at the end that, wow, scientists really don't know that much about our universe. For example, we don't actually know if the universe is infinite. I mean, it's kind of assumed that it is, and we can't rule it out, but we don't even know that. And a lot of these theories of parallel universes are based on the idea that the universe is infinite and that there could be many universes, and so there could actually be different versions of yourself on other universes. Yeah. So if there is an extinction level event coming up and you do die, well, you might only be in this universe. Another version of you might be continuing on.
I was just going to say, those people that you were just describing there, though, Scott, that take everything at face value with scientists and just instantly it may as well be the gospel, are much similar to different religious peoples throughout the entirety of human history. I mean, really, once it becomes a matter of faith, many people who take things as matters of faith don't look at it as taking it as a matter of faith. They look at it as a simple fact, as a plain-faced fact that it should be prima facie. Everybody should be able to see this. And yet, it's not necessarily the case of how it is. And I think true skepticism of the scientific data versus the scientific ideal is extremely important, because the scientific ideal, like many of these religious ideals, like many perspectives, like many political sciences, like many just ideas in general, are wonderful. But how people practice it isn't exactly the same thing, and is often about as far from the ideal as you could get.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think, but I also think to an extent, like, if people do take things as, cut and dried, when actually the reality is much more kind of fluid and hypothetical, you can't say, well, some people believe that the way science understands the world now is the absolute truth and we're done. So you can't say, okay, because some people believe that, that's a problem of science. Maybe to some extent, maybe science doesn't communicate what it means very clearly to the average person when it says, for example, the universe is expanding. Maybe it's not clear enough that this is just our current theory. So to some extent, perhaps you can blame science for that. But I think you also have to put a share of blame on the people who just don't bother to find out. That this is a fluid situation which we're learning about, and they just go, oh, thank you very much, I've got my truth sorted now, I can go back to work.
Yeah, well, that follower mentality is a very, very human trait. I in no way want to just put that just on specifically scientists or the science in general. It's so human to simply want to follow anybody or anything without any sort of skepticism at all, or just any sort of critical thinking.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to finish in a second, but I did come across one thing in this article which confused me slightly. Maybe you can help me, or maybe one of the listeners can. But it was talking about the Big Bang, and you may be aware of the inflationary theory, where things expanded very rapidly after the Big Bang. There was a vacuum, and it caused everything to expand at a fantastic speed. And it actually says much, much faster than the speed of light, which I found curious, because I've always been led to believe that the speed of light is the fastest speed in the universe, and that it can never be surpassed. But here in this article, it's saying that after the Big Bang, according to the inflation theory, this vacuum expanded faster than the speed of light.
I believe that it was, and I'm not entirely sure about this, but I believe that it was Einstein who who said that the speed of light is the kind of maximum possible speed. Listeners, please feel free to correct me if somebody said it before he did. But, you know, that was over 100 years ago. And since then, it seems to me the situation has been scientists saying, yeah, the speed of light's the maximum speed, except that maybe, and continuing from there, like with, you know, little loopholes and caveats and possible hypothetical exceptions. So I think the speed of light, I think this idea that the speed of light is unsurpassable is something that you'll probably still find in high school textbooks, but you probably won't find in kind of, you know, post-grad science departments.
I don't know, because there was a few years back, there was that, again, correct me listeners if I'm wrong, neutrinos. There was some going around those colliders. Scientists had judged them to be going slightly faster than the speed of light, and there was a big uproar in the scientific world saying this cannot be, this would change everything, nothing travels faster than the speed of light, this would make time travel possible.
People are going to have to travel a lot faster than the speed of light if we actually intend to get to any of these damn exoplanets everybody's talking about in less than like 8,000 years.
Yeah, we're not going to be going there soon. But anyway, there was a big uproar, and all the scientists were saying, this cannot be, this must be a mistake, and later they decided it was a mistake. So I think, again, listeners, correct us if it's wrong, but I think the speed of light is supposed to be the maximum speed. That's why I found this curious. But I'll give the last word to you two, and then we'll wrap up today's episode.
All right. What would you like the last word to be?
That could be your last word, if you like. And Seth?
That's terrible. Just to remind people that this picture that we've got, I'm looking at right here on phys.org, of the Milky Way, showing the exact galactic center and a picture of it with exact placement of the sun and exact placement of the Kepler mission and how many light years away they're shooting towards galactic center there, about 20,000 light years, that they know all of this exactly for a fact, where Earth is, all this type of stuff. People get that impression. Anybody that's educated understands that this is mostly just theory. In fact, like 90% of it plus is theory as far as where the Earth is in the Milky Way galaxy. But all these pictures that people have drawn for them that literally are not actual pictures, because, I mean, yeah, we're going to go back, like 800,000 light years in space just to take this picture just for you college grads there. But any of this type of stuff, it's all pictures. It's all an idea. None of it's necessarily as concrete as many people would like to believe. So always keep an open mind to stuff, but at the same point, by the same token, keep a healthy amount of skepticism in your back pocket there, because you're going to need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it might have been Bill Bryson who mentioned something like this about the planets in the solar system. He had, I think, in his high school textbook, a fold-out page so that they could put all the planets on the page. But he said then when he asked an actual scientist while he was researching his book, the scientist said, well, you'd have to start folding the page, you know, in New York and fold it all the way to like Los Angeles, you know, if you actually wanted to reproduce it to scale. So yeah, I think anything like that definitely needs to be taken with, you know, several packets of salt.
And I'm struck by sort of not just how little we as humanity know about the universe around us, but also individuals. I wonder how many people, if I said, you know, draw our solar system, draw the planets and name all the planets. There's a lot of people who couldn't, and I think it might be just worth our while in sort of learning a bit more about what we think we know about the world, the universe around us. Anyway,
I totally agree.
Okay, so thanks guys, and thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll speak to you all again soon.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure as always.
Everybody, enjoy your night.
Yeah, and nice to talk to you again, Seth. It's always fun.
As always.
Hello, so thank you very much for listening. We've got a few minutes left, so I thought I'd read a little bit from the Mars One mission website. Here we go. So it says, it is Mars One's goal to establish a human settlement on Mars. A human settlement of Mars is the next giant leap for humankind. Exploring the solar system as a united humanity will bring us all closer together. Mars is the stepping stone of the human race on its voyage into the universe. Human settlement on Mars will aid our understanding of the origins of the solar system, the origins of life, and our place in the universe. As with the Apollo moon landings, a human mission to Mars will inspire generations to believe all things are possible, anything can be achieved. Let me know what your feelings are on the Mars One mission. Do you think it's going to go ahead? I also found a site that listed 6 basic things we don't know about the universe, and if you type that into Google, you'll find it. It's by Eric Berger. The 6 things that are listed here are how big the universe is. It could be 150 billion light years across, but nobody's quite sure how big it is at all. What shape is it? Possibly flat, possibly not. Nobody's quite sure. What caused the Big Bang? Natural result of physics? God? Who knows? Why is the universe just right for us? So that's talking about the Goldilocks paradox, how everything just seems to be finely tuned just to support us. If gravity was just a little weaker than it is, then there would be severe problems. Other things we don't know are whether there's one or many universes. We mentioned a bit about multiverses earlier in today's episode. Also, what makes up 95% of the universe? Dark matter, dark energy? Nobody's quite sure. And of course the ultimate question, are we alone in the universe? I guess that all depends on whether the universe is infinite or not. Many people believe that with the universe being so vast, it would be unlikely that there's nothing else out there. What do you think? I'd be interested to hear your views. Why don't you send us an email or leave a voicemail on our website www.truthsentinel.co.uk. That's www.truthsentinel.co.uk, or leave a message in the chat room on there, or even write to us, scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our past episodes. We've got lots of other episodes, over 60 now I think, on YouTube, so find us at Truth Sentinel with Scott. If you type that into YouTube, you should find us. There's 2 channels actually. Subscribe to us, then you'll never miss an episode, but also listen to us on the digital networks, which you can find at the bottom of the website, www.truthsentinel.co.uk. I remember also that you can buy T-shirts on there at www.truthtshirts.com. Use the code TRUTH1 to get your special Truth Sentinel discount of 10%, and we get a small donation. Talking of donations, I don't often make appeals for donations, but there is equipment to be bought to keep this show on the road. That's a laptop, and also need to pay for the cost of the website, etc., which are coming up for renewal soon, and things are very tight. So if you do have a little bit of spare cash, only if you have spare cash, I wouldn't want you to go broke yourself, then please go to the website and find the donations button at the bottom and just give a little bit. Even if it's a couple of dollars or pounds, it all helps, and it helps keeps this show continuing and gives us the chance to buy some equipment to make sure the sound quality is up to scratch. Thanks very much in advance. If you are an authority on a subject and you'd like to come and join us on Truth Sentinel, you're always welcome. We love to hear from listeners. Also, if there's a guest that you've heard on another podcast or you know about and you would like to hear a podcast with that person as a guest, please contact us and we'll try and make it happen. scottsentinel9@gmail.com. In the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic week and that you'll join us in our next episode. Thanks again. Goodbye.